Hello, this session is STEAM Learning Through Play, Screen-Free Coding and Robotics for your young learners with KIBO. I'm Jason Innes, the Manager of Training and Curriculum Development at KinderLab Robotics, and we're the makers of KIBO, which is a programmable robot designed for 4 to 7-year-olds. I'd like to start by asking you to picture what you think robotics looks like in the early childhood classroom. So when you think about kids learning coding or robotics, maybe you picture kids working on screens, computers, tablets. Maybe you picture kids sort of hunched over, isolated from each other, working on these devices. And it may not look like the way you picture a sort of natural early childhood classroom. So I'd like to play for you a short video that for us captures what robotics really can look like in early childhood.
You put your robot in, you put your robot out, you put your robot in, you do the hokey-pokey and you turn yourself around. That's what it's all about.
So in that video, we see kids doing things that look very familiar in an early childhood classroom context. There's music, there's movement, the kids are interacting in the physical space of the classroom, they're interacting with each other, there's laughter. All of these behaviors that we expect to see in early childhood can be supported through creative coding experiences with robotics. So KIBO, our robot, is designed primarily to support these kinds of positive behaviors. So working with KIBO is entirely screen-free. Kids interact with the robot in a very hands-on way. They collaborate in small groups. They build the physical object of the robot, and then they program it using a unique screen-free coding language that I'll explain. The parts of the robot are also made to attach and detach easily, so the children are engaged in the engineering side of building the robot and of working with the robot. So if they want a robot that can move around, they attach the wheels and motors themselves. If they want a robot that can sense its environment with a sound sensor or a light sensor, they attach those parts to the robot themselves. So the robot is assembled by the kids to do whatever purpose the kids imagine as part of their project. The robot also doesn't look like anything in particular to begin with. It's not like a specific character or vehicle or animal. The idea is that children are going to build onto the robot with arts and crafts materials, with Legos, with recycle craft, in order to transform the robot into a character or an animal or a vehicle of their own that fits into the curriculum that you're teaching using the robot. So I mentioned that working with the robot is screen-free. That's true with the physical object of the robot, and it's also true with the coding of the robot. So an important part of the learning that children do with robotics and with coding is the idea of computer programming. Now, normally computer programming requires some kind of screen-based device, a computer, an iPad, a tablet. With KIBO, we want to make the entire experience, even the coding, totally screen-free. So a familiar manipulative in early childhood classrooms is, of course, wooden blocks. So with KIBO, each of these wooden blocks that you see here represent one command for the robot to follow. The children assemble a sequence of commands using these wooden blocks, placing them one after another from beginning to end, and in between is a sequence of events that they would like the robot to act out. In this way, creating a program is kind of like creating a story, where the children create a sequence from beginning to end, and then they teach that sequence to their robot to act out. They teach it to the robot by allowing the KIBO to read the barcodes that are at the bottom of each block. So each robot has a barcode scanner built into the front, which the children use to scan the blocks one by one in sequence to teach their programs to the robot. These aspects of the physical work with the robot, the movement, and then the sequential programming come together in activities like the Hokey-Pokey that you just saw. So in that activity in our curriculum, we have the children dance the Hokey-Pokey together, and then at a circle, we reflect with them on how the sequence of actions in the dance is really like a sequence of instructions that they're following as they dance along. So then we have the children work in small groups using KIBO's movement commands. We ask them to create a sequence of commands that will have their robots dance the Hokey-Pokey along with them. So there's trial and error involved, there's experimentation, there's problem solving. The children work together to create a sequence that has their robot dance to the music along with them. And then we end in a sort of robot and human dance party where the children and their robots dance together. So we're integrating the technical skills and the problem solving and the critical thinking, but we're also combining that with collaboration, with music, with movement. And this is a perfect encapsulation of the kinds of activities we can do with screen-free robotics. So our company's mission really is to promote universal STEM literacy. And we feel that the best way to do that is to give very young children the experience of creating with technological tools. So expressing themselves with these new technologies is the best way to give children an early experience, an early confidence that they can see themselves as engineers, as programmers, as creators with these tools. We were founded in 2013. We were co-founded by Mitch Rosenberg, who's comes from a background in industrial robotics, and then our co-founder and chief scientist, Professor Marina Bers from Tufts University. She is the chair of the Elliott Pearson School at Tufts, and she's also an associate professor of computer science. And those are really the two interests that have driven her research career. She's interested in finding ways to bring creative technology use into early childhood in a way that supports the teaching that we're already trying to do in early childhood. So her focus is not primarily on technology, certainly not technology for technology's sake, but using technology to promote positive child development and engaging curriculum. She continues to research and write, but she's also the chief scientist at KinderLab. I'd encourage you to check out any of these books of hers if you're interested. Her most recent book, Coding as a Playground, is a great overview of the variety of technological creative tools that are available for teaching young children. Why is it important to even teach young children coding? So these are some of the threads of Dr. Bers' research, which are expressed in tools like KIBO. We feel that it's important to engage young children with technology as active producers with these tools rather than as passive consumers. Children are curious about the world around them. They're curious about all aspects of it, and that includes technology. So as they explore technology, we want them to have the experience of expressing themselves with these tools rather than just using them. And then tying into the idea of giving children experiences that open doors for them to promote universal STEM literacy, we want to allow children to develop their self-image as being comfortable with technology and engineering. Dr. Bers and her team, some of the research that they've done has found that as young as 7 or 8 years old, children are beginning to internalize stereotypes and self-conceptions about themselves, about whether they're good at STEM, whether they're interested in engineering. A lot of these stereotypes tie to gender norms and prejudices about socioeconomic status. By allowing children to have these positive experiences creating with technology before those stereotypes start to take hold, we can help inoculate children against those stereotypes and keep options open for them. We're not necessarily trying to turn every child into a programmer or an engineer, but we would like to have children keep those options open for themselves as they enter elementary and beyond. So why robotics in particular? Well, we know from long established research into child development that children learn best by moving, by doing and making things with their hands. They also learn best when they can experiment, when they can collaborate, when they can exchange ideas. So all of these attributes are supported by technologies that allow children to stay off screens, move around in the physical space of the classroom, and interact with each other moving around in that space. And then the block-based programming, using these physical manipulatives to program KIBO, ties into the fact that young children learn best when they can manipulate concrete objects with their hands. Coding is already a very abstract concept. By making it some part of it more physical, we increase the ability of young children to engage with these concepts. 21st century learning and innovation skills are also supported by work with KIBO. The critical thinking and problem solving is built into the entire experience as children create a sequence to represent the movements or expressions that they want the robot to do. Creativity is incorporated as children build onto the robot to transform it. Collaboration, of course, that's supported through our curriculum as children work in small groups, solving these problems together. And then communication. We want children to see and experience that coding is really a new literacy in the sense that it's a means of self-expression. So just as we would teach children to write or engage in art or music to express themselves, we can have them express themselves through code as well. So that's the rationale behind KIBO and a little bit about the design. So now let's take a look at how KIBO can look in the classroom. So through children's projection and imagination and building, what can KIBO become? KIBO can become a dancer. So we talked about the Hokey-Pokey activity where children learn the basic idea of using code to create a sequence of movements for the robot. We can increase the learning goals of an activity like that by merging it with sort of social studies work where children might choose a culture or a festival from another country, learn about the music and costumes of that festival, and then decorate their robots on the art platforms that are built onto the top of KIBO with recycle craft, arts and crafts materials to turn their robots into dancers from those cultures. We might do the same with a community unit. So if kids are learning about the role of fire trucks, ambulances, police cars in their community, they could build a map of the neighborhood using classroom furniture or art supplies, and then decorate their robot as vehicles or people who live in that town and create programs to navigate from place to place within the town. We might explore animals and their habitats using KIBO. So we might create a map that represents the west coast of North America and learning about gray whales, for example, and their migration patterns. We can build onto the robot, again, to transform it into a meaningful object within the context of the curriculum the kids are doing, and then the programming of the movement of the whale along its migration route becomes a context that adds extra meaning to the programming work that the children are doing as they investigate this science content. KIBO might become a bowling ball in a simple activity where the kids are trying to send KIBO down the alley to knock down the pins. It's a simple framing, it's a motivating framing, but really the kids are engaging in measurement, estimation, and prediction using non-standard units of measurement. So they can see how far KIBO goes forward with one forward command, and then use that to estimate and predict how many forward commands they'll need to get KIBO all the way down to the end of the bowling alley. So engaging with non-standard units of measurement is an early math standard that we need to be working on anyway. This provides a hands-on, physically engaging way to explore those standards. And then just as we can address math standards, we can also address literacy standards with this idea of storytelling through programming. So children might decorate KIBO to look like a character in a favorite book or a book that the class is working on. So for example, in The Very Hungry Caterpillar, we could create an environment that's as simple as the different food sources that the caterpillar eats throughout the story. Children decorate the robot to be a character in the story and act out the scene through movement as the caterpillar travels from one food source to the next. So this is essentially retelling the story in a new way, which taps into a number of early literacy goals as well. We can take this a step farther. KIBO has a part that allows children to record their own voices and play back those sounds within the program. In this project, the kids created all the different environments that the family travels through in Going on a Bear Hunt, and they had their KIBO travel from environment to environment. They had read the lines of the chorus, can't go over it, can't go under it, got to go through it. They'd recorded themselves reading those lines, and KIBO played those lines back as it traveled through each environment. So the children essentially recreated the action of Going on a Bear Hunt, with robotics being the palette that they used to express themselves and their understanding of the story. So KIBO can really become and do all of this because we designed it to be anything children can imagine, because it's open-ended, because children can build onto it, program it to do whatever they imagine it doing. We are able to bring robotics into almost any curriculum area or any work that the children are doing. So children can build onto the robot, decorate the robot, and then code based on what they imagine the robot doing. So at this point, I'll switch on my webcam and give you a quick live demonstration of how coding the robot works, how we put together the blocks, and how the parts of the robot relate to the code that we give it. So this is KIBO, the robot. The robot on its own doesn't actually do anything. So children attach parts to the slots on the robot or attach wheels and motors to the sides in order to give the robot the abilities that they want it to act out. We invite children into the engineering through this by making the bottom of the robot clear so that they can see the parts. Although they won't be doing any soldering of the circuit boards, we want them to understand that the parts of the robot are there because people designed it that way, and that it's these parts that make the robot work. So the children take part in that by attaching things to the robot. So children might attach wheels and motors if they want the robot to be able to move. So once they've done that, they have a robot that can move. Now, we talked about the wooden blocks, which give the robot its instructions. This is how the children code the robot. So every program for the robot is like a story with a beginning and an ending. And in between are the blocks that will give the robot different abilities. So now that we've added wheels and motors, we can use the blue blocks that allow the robot to move. So if I create a program as simple as this, begin and end, with spin in between, we'll be able to control the robot to make it move. So I'll show you how the scanning works. We take the robot and wake it up. Once we activate the robot, the scanner on the front of the robot starts going, and we can now scan the blocks. So once we scan the program, we can run it by pressing this button, and KIBO will spin around. Now, we might want to ask the robot to do some additional things that use additional parts. So let's say we want the robot to turn on a light bulb. So we need to attach the light bulb part. Let's say we want the robot to respond to sounds in the environment. So robots are, one of the things that robots can do is respond to their environment with sensor parts, just like our human senses. So if we want KIBO to wait for our clapping sound, we need to add the sensor part that lets it hear. So we attach that part too. So now we have a light bulb and we have a sound sensor on our robot. So I'll add some steps to our program. So instead of just spinning around, we'll ask KIBO to turn on the light bulb and then wait for our clapping sound and then spin around. Now we can scan this longer program. And now when we run it, KIBO will light up its light bulb. Then wait for our clapping sound. And then it will spin around. So these different blocks represent the different commands that KIBO will follow. Kids create a story by attaching the blocks together from beginning to end, and then the robot will act out each step of the story in sequence. So this reinforces the connection to sequencing, it reinforces the connection to literacy and to storytelling as kids create instructions or programs for their robots to follow. The parts of the robot are what give it all of these abilities. And then the children can also decorate the art platform for KIBO with craft materials, with recycle craft, in order to integrate the robotics into projects like we talked about earlier with the dances or the animals or the community lessons. So children simply attach this art platform to the slot in the center of KIBO, and this platform will now rotate as KIBO moves, allowing children to build onto the robot, to project their imagination onto it, but also allowing the teacher to integrate KIBO into a range of different curriculum activities. Okay, now that we've seen KIBO in action, let's talk a little bit about teaching with KIBO and about our curriculum. The curriculum that comes with KIBO is also based on the research done by Dr. Bers and her team. And all of the curriculum integrates these three themes: computational thinking, which is children learning about programming and problem solving in an organized way; the engineering design process, which is sort of how they engage with the building of the robot and decorating the robot, but it's also a way of thinking about solving problems using a kind of structured design process. And then finally, an integration component, which is bringing the work that they're doing into some meaningful context, whether that's the sort of community and science, dances that we saw earlier, whether it's recreating a story. Integrating the work into areas that the kids are interested in and the teachers are working in is central to this idea of using robotics as a literacy for kids to express themselves. Learning through play is also a fundamental aspect of working with KIBO. So we always make sure to leave a lot of time for open-ended work with KIBO where kids can just experiment, but we also have some specific structured games that are part of our curriculum. So for example, the robot comes with a collection of large cards that represent the different commands that KIBO can follow, and we use those to play Simon Says style games where the kids act out the movement with their own bodies. Making and building with KIBO is also fundamental to this experience. So building onto the robot, decorating the robot, you've seen how that plays a part, but from the point of view of the children, it also provides a different pathway into the experience. So there are some kids who will respond immediately to the idea of programming robots. Others are much more interested in the building, the decorating, the imagination. By providing all of these pathways into the experience, we can bring kids who have diverse interests along with us to the sort of the same goal. So the curriculum is available along with the robots. We have a range of different curriculum booklets to support different teaching modes. So in early childhood classrooms, it's common to have sort of a stations set up. To support that approach, we have our Activity Center Guidebook, which includes 10 different station ideas, ranging from kind of novice to more advanced. This is to support kind of independent work or self-directed work in small groups with 1 or 2 robots in the classroom. And then for sort of a longer term implementation, we have our Growing with KIBO curriculum guide. This is a comprehensive guide that delivers 60 hours of lesson plans, taking kids really from kindergarten to 2nd grade, meeting evolving national computer science standards along the way. The lesson plans are designed to be implemented by classroom teachers, not necessarily specialists in technology integration. So we've written it for teachers for whom coding and robotics are new challenges, both for them and for their students. And this book is centered more around whole class instruction. So the idea is that with 5, 6, 7 robots, with kids working in groups of 2 to 4, you could engage the entire class in these projects simultaneously. We also offer a range of professional development to help teachers get comfortable with these tools. So part of purchasing KIBO is getting access to some built-in remote web-based training that we offer along with every classroom package that we sell. And then we also can provide on-site workshops when multiple teachers, maybe at a school or within a district, are looking to implement this together. So we see training as a fundamental part of being successful with these new kinds of teaching tools. So thank you very much for the time you've spent checking out KIBO, and please get in touch with us if we can answer any questions about bringing KIBO into your school.